Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to cut straight to the chase and say that my presentation will be a lot more general. I'm not going to go into any technical details. That's not the purpose of my presentation today. I'm a philosopher, a political philosopher at that, and my purpose is to look at which path should we give priority to resolve a problem which concerns us all, and how can we conciliate the need for social justice, whether it be on a national or international scale, and on the other side, justice between generations, i.e., what we can, what we should, and what we owe to future generations. So I'm calling on your intuitive skills to follow me. Now, obviously, if we all agree on the fact that we need to take action now for future generations, then that supposes that there is certain effort to be made. And the price of an energy transition is part of that effort. And so that means that we shouldn't be free riders. We all have to contribute to this effort. Now, the efforts to be made shouldn't be an excuse to say that we should all sacrifice our needs and life. Therefore, the moral responsibility that we have for future generations shouldn't lead to sacrificing life today. Now, communist ideals showed us that the idea of sacrifice exists, but moving towards a better world shouldn't be at the cost of sacrificing today. Then we have social inequality amongst people today. I'm not going to give you figures on a world scale today, but for a country like France, an industrialized country, we have a fairly good social protection, whereas in other countries there is no access to drinking water. Just to very broadly illustrate the differences which exist today. So the question we have today is how can we draw these two opposing situations closer together to achieve our final goal? And I think that one approach is to give priority to social justice at a national and world scale between existing people living today. And that's what I call social preference for today. And I'm going to illustrate my thoughts in 3 ways. Why that is fairer for people today and future generations, and why it's better for an energy transition. And then why there is this preference for social justice today, with a few arguments to support my case. So, social preference for today. So I'm asking you to think abstractly about this rather abstract notion. Now, when I talk about generation, I'm talking generally people who are living at the same time. So we might be a different age, but I'm talking about generation in the broad sense of the term. Generations succeed each other on planet Earth. And each generation, therefore, inherits what they get from the previous generation and pass on to the next generation. And that is the product of their efforts or lack of efforts. Therefore, technical process means that we have a social security net today. But then the cost of that is global warming. Implementing social preference for today, and this is the term that I personally have coined, is setting priority for social justice at present in order to underpin cross-generational cooperation. I'm going to come back to this later on. In order to allow wealthy populations to pass on the benefits of their efforts, it's necessary to ensure that poorer peoples in the world also benefit from this product. That's the general interest that I'm trying to defend. So the idea is that everybody benefits from technical progress which is made in France or anywhere else, any other industrialized country in the world. And so we have a universal social protection for everybody, which might be somewhat utopic, but this is one of the general ideals that I'm trying to defend, guaranteeing each and every individual a fundamental basic or fundamental minimum. So why is this preference for the present more just? Well, I think it's fairly logical that it should be fairer for those who are living, because once again, the whole idea is to ensure that all populations in the world benefit from technical progress. And there is an example by Brian Barry, a Canadian philosopher, I believe, who is already deceased, but he said, as I pointed out, that it is fairer that those who benefit from progress of richer countries, and in the field of energy transition, it should not only benefit to other generations, but to all populations who don't necessarily have access, but also suffer the consequences of what's been produced by other generations. So all the living participate in the sharing of what's produced. Now, why is this fairer? Because it's against their rights. Now, I believe, it's quite clear, this intergenerational cooperation should not go beyond the social objective and fundamental elements. Growth over the long term from generation to generation has a social objective. If we're trying to satisfy increasingly large needs, then we are condemned to a consumerist society. If we have an energy transition amongst the living today, these means will be inherited by future generations of poor countries today. That means that living populations in poorer countries today will not only benefit from technological progress, but so will their future generations. In order to illustrate what I'm trying to say, there is a Branko Milanovic, an economist from the World Bank, who said that 80% of revenue, and if we extrapolate the social position of people, is determined by their geographical origin. What he's saying is that when you're in a rich country, well, you have a greater likelihood of yourself being rich and being richer than the majority of the population. So better distribution to population should ensure better distribution to future generations. So the preference for the present can help us reach an energy transition. I did say in my introduction, and I think it's important to recall, the richest, just like the poorest, contribute to this collective effort. We're not talking about just asking one section of the population to make an effort and let others behave like free riders, which will reduce the impact of efforts made by others. Now, of course, the effort has to be properly distributed. It's not just a question of asking everybody to make the same effort, because not everybody has the same means to provide that effort. So the basic idea is to ensure better distribute the fruit of technical process, and there we're looking at conditional situation. We're looking at everybody and make everybody contribute more to technical progress. So the idea again is that we extract ourselves from daily problems, the present, To be frank, when you don't have access to drinking water, it's difficult to ask somebody who doesn't have access to drinking water to make an effort to technological progress. But to make sure that everybody has the means to make a basic effort to contribute to this move, and to have the freedom to act, not only for themselves, but for future generations. So I did say at the beginning of my presentation that it would be very general and very intuitive. The basic idea is that a fair distribution of efforts to be made by the people living today is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Well, in fact, there are two aspects to this. We can, on the one hand, distribute effort equally, depending on their means. My point, however, is to show that the benefit of the effort being made can be distributed in a way to ensure that we have overall better efficiency and equality. And again, the idea is that we have social justice amongst the living, and so the advantage is not only greater for poorer populations to benefit from technological process, but on top of it, it's a wager for technical progress to ensure this energy transition. I do have one observation off the bat. The impression that I have is I'm not sure whether it's possible to apply this idea of distributive justice between generations based on the premise that we're in an existential state, and to know whether our future generations will be the same, and therefore whether we are on a one-way path, which means if I pursue this line of thought, we arrive at a point of view that was presented by Jean-Christophe Dupuis in the newspaper Le Monde. If we are preoccupied with the existence of future generations, if we take the catastrophe scenario where we see a breakdown in civilization, then we shouldn't be working for those generations, because maybe they won't exist and they don't have a voice today. But perhaps it's more an effort that we should be making today for our own well-being and state of mind for the future of humankind. So it's not so much the stakes that are at play, as Johann Jonas said, that to ensure that humankind in future will be as happy as we are, but at least that their chances of survival exist. I was positing my presentation on future generations, but then what you've just said raises a whole bundle of philosophical issues, because in non-existence, can they have a right in themselves? Because even if we show that our present acts and decisions are the root of future generation, the state of future generations, how can we determine whether our act is good or bad for them? It's a very complex notion. What I'm trying to say, on the contrary, is in the intergenerational subject, distributive justice is very important, because the resources, the social, natural resources that we have today, not us, we should do what we have to do to ensure that they are passed on. And if we don't show that we have to do something for future generations, then there is no purpose to what we're discussing now, because then we could just take the decision to deplete all our resources now. And so there is this whole issue of passing on or leaving an inheritance. Well, we may come back to this topic later on. There's no microphone, sorry.